Now on both the add column and the transform is a group of buttons: rounding, information, trigonometry, scientific, standard, and statistics. Depending on whether you want to transform a column or whether you're wanting to add a column, depends on which tab you choose. I'm going to go for add. And I've got this gross column that we created in an earlier video. And let's start by looking at rounding. I want to add a column that rounds the gross, and if I click this drop down, I can round up, round down, or round to a certain number of decimal places. So if I round up, it adds a column called round up, and you'll notice my 68.75 has rounded up to 69, so it rounds up to the nearest dollar. If I then delete that step, I can click on gross, I can click on rounding and round down, just to experiment and see what these various options look like. And so this is rounded down to the nearest dollar. And again, I can delete that step, go back to gross, and if I went to rounding and said round, I could tell it to actually round to maybe one decimal place, and okay. And so my 68.75, if I scroll to the right, is now rounded to one decimal place, which is 68.8. So that's how the rounding works, and I'll just delete that step and have gross selected. If I was to go to information, I get the option of is even, is odd, and sign. If I was to choose is even, it would add a column that said whether the value was even or not. So it would show a true if the value was even and a false if it was not. And the opposite would happen if I said is odd. So if I choose is odd for argument's sake, then this is saying to me this is not an odd number, this is not an odd number, but this is an odd number. And then I can delete that step. If I was to choose under information sign, then it will give me a 1 if the value in the gross column is a positive, a 0 if it's a 0, and a negative 1 if it's a negative number. These are all positive numbers, so when I go sign, they're all going to show as 1s, and I can delete that. So that's how those two buttons work. Now trigonometry is only going to make sense if you understand trigonometry, but this will actually create a column and work out the sine, the cosine, the tangent, the arc sine, the arc cosine, or the arc tangent. So if I went for tangent, for example, this has worked out the tangent for that gross figure, and I can delete that. If I was to choose gross and say give me scientific, then I could ask it to add a column that gave me an absolute value. So it only gave me the positive result for any positive or negative number. I could ask it to give me power, give me the square, give me the cube, or give me the power of whatever number I choose. I could ask it to give me the square root or an exponent. I could ask for a base 10 or a natural logarithm, or even a factorial. So again, if you're not really familiar with these, you won't use them. So scientific is possible. If I went for standard, I can actually ask it to add a value to the gross, multiply the gross by a value, subtract a value from the gross, divide, and so on. So say, for example, I had to add a standard $3.50 fee. I would click add, and it says add what? So I go 3.5, and okay. And so it will create a column that adds 3.5 to each of the gross values. So that's how that particular standard works. Now, as far as statistics go, I'm going to go to transform. If I go to transform and I've got the gross chosen here, if I go to statistics, it will sum up all those gross values and just give me the total. And so that is the absolute total there. And if I delete that and went back to gross, selected that, went back to transform, went back to statistics, I could just for the smallest, the largest, the median, the average, the standard deviation, or count the number of records, number of gross figures, or count the number of unique or distinct values. So those are what those buttons do, whether you want to transform or add a column.